Let's grow together. And now our message by Rev Martin, Promises, Promises.
Good morning. We are going to spend the next few moments looking at promises. And I read about a politician who visited a little village just about a week before the election. And he asked the locals what their needs were. And a village elder said, "We have two basic needs, sir. First, we have a hospital, but there's no doctor." So the politician whipped out his cell phone, and after speaking to someone for a couple of minutes, he hung up and he promised the villagers that a doctor would be there within a month. He then asked about the second problem, and the reply was, "Well, secondly, sir, there's no cell phone coverage anywhere in this village." You'll get that on the way home. Well, what was the last promise that you made to someone? May have been something along the lines of, "Yes, honey, I'll take the trash out after dinner," or "I'll be there, I promise," or "I promise to pay you back next Friday." Some of you may remember Popeye's friend Wimpy, who would be glad to pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today. Well, we all make commitments all the time. How often do you keep your promises? It may be impossible to follow through on every single promise you've made, but how many promises you break and how you handle things when you do is key to understanding yourself, and it's a key to getting along with others. When we don't keep our promise to someone, it tells that person that we don't value him or her. We've chosen to put something else ahead of our commitment. And even when we break small promises, others learn that they can't count on us. Fractures develop in our relationships caused by broken promises. A promise, as defined by Merriam-Webster's dictionary, is a declaration that one will do or refrain from doing something specified. In other words, I promise to do this, and or I promise not to do that. So promises fall into three categories: promises made, promises kept, and promises broken. And then there are subcategories of each of those types, things like promises made with good intentions, promises made foolishly, promises made just to get someone off our back, promises made so we won't feel guilty, promises made so that we'll look good to other people, promises that commit to more than we can deliver, and promises repeated too often. You've got to beware of those. It's been said that when a man repeats a promise again and again, he means to fail you. And then there are promises made to family, and the corollary promises that the family asks us to make. Things like, promise never to put me in a nursing home, promise never to sell the home or the farm or the family business, promise that after I'm gone, you'll take care of fill in the blank. My favorite, promise never to speak to cousin Ned because of what he did in 1978, and promise me you'll never forgive him or his children. Well, these kinds of things may arise from fear or anger, or maybe not trusting you to do the right thing, perhaps because you've had a track record of not keeping your word. And these types of promises can be very toxic, not only to ourselves and the entire family, but they can also be harmful to the one delivering the promise. Extracting a promise never to forgive means the person asking will go to the grave embittered. And then there are promises made to our friends and coworkers and neighbors. And keeping our word provides us with a way to demonstrate the values that we hold dear. Values such as reliability, trustworthiness, integrity, or simply that we care. And as such, promises made to others are not merely about keeping our word for the sake of being a truthful person. They're about cultivating healthy relationships. It's been said that promises may get us friends, but it's performance that must nurse and keep them. Or as an old Russian saying puts it, don't put it in my ear, put it in my hand. And then there are promises that we make to ourselves, promises to finally start exercising and getting healthier, promises to clean the house or the garage or the car, promises to make time for meditation and prayer, promises to speak up the next time something bothers us. And when it comes to making promises to ourselves, it's helpful for us to try to think about this from a friend's perspective. That is to say, if you were your own friend, would you be satisfied or disappointed with the reliability with which you keep your promises? The truth is, you should be your own best friend. After all, you're the only person in the world that you have to live with 24/7. And this perspective can help us recognize the importance of keeping promises to ourselves by seeing ourselves as a friend. And when we repeatedly break a contract with ourselves, we experience feelings of disappointment, frustration, distrust. All of these do damage to our self-esteem. So never let yourself down. The burden of yesterday's broken promises is a heavy load to carry. And when you make and keep promises to yourself, you become a better, more fully realized version of yourself, which benefits not only you, but everyone around you. You may become a true role model for someone who's struggling to remain faithful to their own vision. Don Miguel Ruiz talks about being impeccable with your word. And impeccable means without sin. And sin means that it's anything that goes against ourselves, or more specifically, sin is anything that goes against our God self. After all, God has imagined us in perfection, so we can think of sin as being ugly graffiti, which obscures that perfection, something standing between us and our fullest expression of life. And one of the ways we do that is by giving our word and then breaking our word. We know our word is powerful, so we need to use it wisely. Now, all promises are made, first of all, with ourselves, and sometimes they include others. Your word is your most precious thing, so don't give it lightly. Think of it this way. You wouldn't give away your most valuable possessions without thinking carefully about it. And the same applies to your word. Think twice about what you're about to promise yourself or others. Don't rush into a promise rashly. The philosopher Rousseau said, "He who is most slow in making a promise is the most faithful in the performance of it." So you may be thinking, does one broken agreement really matter? Well, if you think of breaking a promise as being a scoop of sand, think of pouring one scoop of sand into a little pond. And if some more scoops may give you a swamp, and still more scoops gives you a bog. You ever feel bogged down? And eventually more scoops gives you a desert, a barren and desolate place. And so it is that a lifetime of broken promises can add up to a lot of sand. So does that make your situation hopeless? Of course not. Simply declare your past broken agreements a beach and get on with it. Go and sin no more. Now, what does keeping your word really mean? It means keep in the sense of, may the good Lord bless and keep you. Or the Chinese proverb, keep a green tree in your heart and a singing bird will come. Keep means to protect and to nurture. Your word is sacred. Protect it, nurture it. Well, how do we keep our promises? What's our best strategy for doing that in life? First, and perhaps most important, make only the promises you intend to keep. And that means in your personal dynamics with others that you may need to learn to say no, or perhaps maybe. It's been said that to learn to say no is more valuable than anything else you can learn. So remember two things. One, no is a complete sentence all by itself. And number two, if you don't want to do it now, you probably won't want to do it later. Secondly, make every promise important. Your word is sacred, and every broken promise costs you in integrity, in trust, in peace of mind. Broken promises may or may not let others down, but they always let you down. 3, keep the promises you made, even if it's inconvenient or expensive or uncomfortable. Keeping promises you'd rather not keep will help you in the future with rule number 1. Make only the promises you intend to keep. And remember that breaking promises at the last minute, which tends to be when we most often break them, makes breaking promises at the last minute a habit, something we don't need any help learning. 4th, consider writing down your promises. It may help you remember to keep your promises in a timely fashion. I'm sorry to say I have a little bit of absent-minded professor in me, and I don't always remember what I need to do in time to do it easily. And then I have to scramble around frantically when I could have done everything in a more relaxed way. It's far better to write it down and put it where I can see it in time to do it. And 5th, communicate immediately if a conflict arises. So if I tell someone something more important has come up, so I've got to break my agreement, well, that will probably not endear you to the person on the receiving end. Far better to say something along the lines of, I gave you my word, and I'm willing to keep it, but something very important has come up. Could we arrange to do this at some other time? And very often that works. But if the other person says, I expect you to keep your promise, be prepared to do so. I had a lot of experience with this concept over the years because I would have a contract to do a show somewhere, and then I would get an offer to do a show that paid a lot more money or that was a lot more prestigious. And just a couple of examples, we went to the upper Midwest to perform 2 shows a day in an Indian reservation casino. We were supposed to do it for 5 weeks, and they kept holding us over. And then one day we got a call from one of our agents saying, you've got to be back in Florida to do this one-nighter. Well, I explained that they were holding us over and it was a really lucrative gig, and we really didn't want to go through the expense and the bother of traveling all the way to Florida to perform this one show. But the agent threw a fit and insisted that we be there. So we loaded everything up, drove all the way down to Fort Lauderdale, and did the show. Then we drove all the way back to the upper Midwest, to the casino. Now, the universe has a way of evening things out. And while we were down there to do that one-nighter, it was the exact same time that Hurricane Andrew hit, a Category 5 storm, and we were home to look after our possessions during that storm. Another time, I got an offer one day on the phone to do several weeks at Bally's Grand in Atlantic City. And I had one show that was going to interfere with that run. And I called up the venue and asked them very nicely, we have this offer. Would it be okay to reschedule our show at your venue? And the man in charge said, yes, that will be possible, and we're thrilled you get a crack at Atlantic City. That was very fortuitous for us because Atlantic City became one of our regular stops each year as long as I was doing that show. So the universe has a way of honoring our concepts and our activities around beliefs and promises. I spoke a minute ago about fulfilling promises to yourself. This is just as important, as I mentioned, as following through with your promises to others. And typically, promises to yourself involve a decision to do better or to be better. And when you make a promise to yourself, you're taking the time to work toward improving your life. And when we work on ourselves, it gives us the ability to better take care of others. But when we break our commitment to ourselves, we set ourselves up for further broken promises later. To use an example that most all of us can relate to, in and around New Year's Eve, we tend to get virtuous and promise ourselves all kinds of things. Eat a healthier diet, exercise more, finally finish that project that we've put off for far too long, and so on. Well, let's say you promise yourself that you're going to start going to the gym 3 times a week, and you get off to a good start, and it's relatively easy to keep that schedule going. But the minute you miss one day, just one day, it becomes so much easier to miss a second day, and the next time, and the next, and before you know it, you're not going to the gym at all. Breaking your promise to yourself one time paves the way for breaking your promise all the time. And the worst part, the next time you seriously consider getting into better physical shape, you may defeat yourself before you even begin. You may throw up your hands and say, what's the use? I've tried this before, and I didn't stick with it. And perhaps the biggest way we break our promises is procrastination. I'll do it later is a foolproof excuse. After all, when later comes, you can still say, I'll do it later, because there's always more later until there isn't. Years ago, a folk poet named Edgar Guest wrote a piece called Tomorrow. It goes like this. He promised to be all that a mortal should be tomorrow. No one would be kinder or braver than he tomorrow. A friend who was weary and troubled, he knew, who would be glad of a lift and who needed it too. On him he would call and see what he could do tomorrow. Each morning he stacked up the letters he'd write tomorrow and thought of the folks he would fill with delight tomorrow. But, sorry to say, he was busy today and hadn't a minute to stop on his way. More time he'd give to his loved ones, he'd say, tomorrow. The greatest of workers this man would have been tomorrow. The world would have known him if he'd ever seen tomorrow. But the fact is, he died and he faded from view. And all that was left when living was through was a mountain of things he had promised to do tomorrow. Well, too often in life, we say things like, I'll get to it later, or I'll do it tomorrow. Well, one day there won't be a tomorrow, so keep your promise now. Then there are promises we make to God. Some of those are kind of silly. Things like, God, if you just help me get through this, I swear I'll never drink again. Now that's actually an attempt at bargaining, which doesn't work. But more exciting and more helpful are promises made by God we find things such as this passage from the book of Proverbs. Honor the Lord with your substance and with the first fruits of all your produce, and then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will be bursting with wine. And in the Old Testament book of Malachi, we find, bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, and test me in this, says the Lord Almighty. See if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there won't be room enough to store it. That's the way the divine plan was outlined in the Bible. And what was written then still applies today. As you give, so shall you receive. Giving and receiving are inseparable parts of the same energy, the energy of circulation. When our giving is limited, what we receive will be limited. And without circulation, our lives become stagnant. And Jesus built on those Old Testament promises by explaining how the process works. Our giving and receiving are blessed by our belief. And so Jesus told his followers, truly I assure you, the one who believes will do the works I do, and do greater works than these. And he also said, I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven, and whatever doors you lock on earth shall be locked in heaven, and whatever doors you open on earth shall be opened in heaven. In other words, we get to choose what we don't want and what we do want. And the laws of mind and spirit honor our intention and our belief, because these promises are backed up by that which is unchanging, that which is reliable, that which is available for our use. It's God's promise to us, a promise that we can test and prove for ourselves. But one word of caution: don't try to drag God into your broken promise. You may have heard things like this, or you may have even said it. I'll be there Tuesday at 7 o'clock, God willing. Isn't that a great excuse? I'll be there unless it's God's will that I don't go. And that way, if I don't show up on Tuesday at 7 o'clock, it's God's fault. And I'd like to spend a moment looking at something called branding. Successful companies build a brand that carries such power that people will pay extra to get that specific brand. And sometimes the brand becomes so powerful that its name becomes synonymous with the product category. So regardless of brand, we may refer to facial tissues as Kleenex. And when we're making copies, we may call them Xeroxes, regardless of who made the copier. And when we think of bandages, we probably think Band-Aid. Well, this brand is built over time by meeting and exceeding the customer's expectations. And this is an ongoing, never-ending process, because it doesn't take much to destroy the trust that has been built up. And once that trust is broken, it's very difficult to rebuild it. Whoever coined the phrase, promises are made to be broken, clearly was not in business with a brand to protect. When businesses create marketing communications to deliver messages about their brand, they're essentially making a promise to would-be consumers about the brand's desirable qualities. But anyone who has dialed up a customer service line knows that a trusted brand image can turn into distrust in a matter of seconds. And the higher the customer's expectations, the faster the trust is destroyed. What's the point? The point is you have a brand. It's your name. Or perhaps you want to call it your I am. You build it up by faithfully keeping your promises. And just like those big corporate brands, it doesn't take much to tear down your name and reputation. So don't accept the idea that promises are made to be broken. Instead, affirm that a promise made is a promise kept. That has a much better ring to it. Your promise is your contract between yourself, God, and others. And Ernest Holmes affirmed his promise to keep his brand as valuable as possible with this little piece called "I Shall Keep the Promise." I shall keep the promise that I have made to myself. I shall never again tell myself that I am poor, sick, weary, nor unhappy. I shall not lie to myself anymore, but shall daily speak the truth to my inner soul, telling it that it is wonderful and marvelous, that it is one with the great cause of all life, truth, power, and action. I shall whisper these things into my soul until it breaks forth into songs of joy with the realization of its limitless possibilities. When you lovingly keep your word, keep it safe, keep it strong, keep it true, you will know the power of your word, and so will others. And when you give your word to a cause, its effect will be powerful. Its effect will be known. So don't put it in my ear, put it in my hand. Your promise is a sacred trust. Your promise carries with it spiritual power. The promises you make your world. Your promise is you, and you are your promise. And so it is.